In this episode of Conversations with Kristi, I'm joined by Neil Milton, founder of the Table Talk Project. We talk about why connection in families matters, how everyday conversations can become powerful protective factors, and why creating space for children and adults to be heard can change everything. This conversation touches on sensitive topics, so please take care whilst watching. Support resources are included in the description if you need them, and let's go have a listen to what Neil has to say. Hello, Neil. I'm so grateful to have you on my podcast. I was just telling you about how I've been meaning to reach out for so long to get you on here, and you're finally here.
Well, I'm grateful to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. And one of the reasons why I wanted to reach out and have you on the podcast is because you've got this amazing project called the Table Talk Project. And now I remember when you were launching this, and I joined your mailing list all the way back then, and I still read your emails. And one of the things that I loved about the Table Talk Project was that it was about helping parents and kids and families connect around the table when they have dinner. And I love that idea because wherever you can create connection is really important, especially when it comes to abuse prevention. So tell my listeners, Neil, what led you to creating the Table Talk Project and what's your purpose for all of this?
So the Table Talk Project is about supporting families to have meaningful conversation around the dinner table. And it really kicked off for me when I started reflecting on my own journey. And my own journey is that I never really felt like I had a voice in my home. And also not just that, but I didn't really have a voice at the table. It was sit down, shut up, eat your vegetables, and I don't like vegetables. And so I would get smacked every night. I would eat slowly. I would be the last one at the table, and there was never any conversation. And I was really searching for an opportunity to be able to talk about what's going on in my life and things like that. But the reality was that I didn't really have a voice in my home, and that kind of came to a head in my reflection at when I was in my early 40s. I was bullied as a kid, and I never had a friend before. And this person actually befriended me, and I was like, oh, this is great. This person's befriending me. And I came to my mum and said to Mum, just want to know, is this what is normal in a friendship? Like what this boy is doing to me? Is this normal? And my mum just said, oh, you just experimented. And that abuse went on for another 3 years. I never knew that it was abuse or anything like that. But what I hadn't realized is that now reflecting on it when I was in my early 40s, I actually recognized that was a contributing factor of realizing that I could never talk to my parents about things that mattered to me, that they'd be brushed off, that they'd be too busy for me, or that I never had a voice, and I could never talk about things. So I think in my mind, I programmed myself to never talk about things that were deep, and I was longing for an adult to talk with and to connect with and all that sort of stuff. And so this boy was about 18 months older than me. I don't actually know. I know the brain actually covers up a lot of trauma, and I don't actually know how it went from playing armies and simple games and things like that to being a sexual. I actually have no idea that transition, but all I know is that in my life from 10 to 13, this boy took advantage of me and used me, and ended up, being in the toilet every single recess and lunchtime. And then after, if I saw him outside of those times, it would be like, he doesn't know me. And when I was 13 years old, I ended, and it was just at that same time as Magic Johnson came out with AIDS. And I was sitting on the toilet. I remember I was sitting there with an old style encyclopedia, none of the Google or ChatGPT thing. And I was looking up all the symptoms and thought to myself, far out, I've got every single symptom of AIDS.
Wow.
What do I do with that? And how do I do it? I've got no one to talk to. But all I can say is that I just believe that somehow my survival technique kicked in, and I just kept living. Now, in my reflection, I realized that might have been the reason why I got into drugs later on and drinking and unhelpful relationships. But what I didn't realize is that starting point was that I'd never had a voice in my home. And because I never had a voice in my home, I never felt like anything was on the table to talk about. It was all off the table. And so in thinking about the Table Talk Project and realizing the impact of abuse, of not having a voice, and how that has set me on my path for the whole of my life to try and get my voice heard through careers, through relationships, through drugs, alcohol, friendships, a number of different things. What I didn't realize was that there was a starting point, and that was that I didn't have a voice. And so the Table Talk project is really about creating a space so that anyone in the family can talk about what's going on, and they
Mm.
know that a minimum once a week, there is a space where they can have dinner together, they can talk about things, and nothing is off the table. And I just really believe that it can save lives.
Wow, Neil. I didn't know all of that. And one of the things that I did know that you were a survivor, and I did know that you had, yeah, I didn't know all that. And whilst you were speaking about the fact that you didn't have anyone you could speak to, and you felt like that you literally, there was no conversation that you could have where your parents would listen and hear you and support you. I felt it in my gut because that was my home as well. And, there was times when I was
Absolutely.
bullied, and yeah, well, it's just that, like you just feel so alone. And it's amazing that we survived that, because loneliness is one of the worst feelings in the world. I don't know about you, but with my own child, I have been like over the top with, like, you can talk to me and you can always have a conversation and nothing is off the
Yeah.
table, and every conversation, and I think that's also not because of trauma. It's because we know that it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in society, because I don't think things have changed that much. I think we've just gotten quicker at what we do. And I think
Mm.
people have become so busy, and they use the term busy as a endearment rather than a tragedy. And we use that term to say, oh, I've got prowess, or I've got something that is huge. I've got this title, I've got this, and I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy. And the reality is that your kids hear that, and they hear that you're busy. And that actually means that translates to them, I'm too busy for you. And so when it comes to that, I never want to be a dad that is not too busy for my children, and that I can't be there for them. And I know that when I was in one particular career, I really invested in that career, and I think I made some really bad decisions with that. And when I got out of that, I realized that my life is just so short, and our time that we have with our children is so short. And the best thing we can offer them is our time and our listening here. And I'm talking about, like, having the phone and going, yes, dear, or yes, yes, yeah, that kind of thing. It's not like that. And it's actually recognizing, being actively listening, and eye contact, and being there for them. It's funny, my birthday was a few days ago, and I got a card from my son, who's 17 years old. And he wrote in this card, and he just said, I want to let you know that thank you for everything you're doing. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate our chats. And he said, like, I really see you as a mate. And I said to my wife, have I failed as a dad? Like, as a dad, do I want to be a mate? Like, all that sort of stuff. And Kate said, actually, no, that's what you want to be. He's about to turn 18, and you've given him everything you've given him, you taught him what you taught him, and now he'll come to you for advice rather than you offering advice before he wants it, type
Yeah.
thing. And so the fact that you're a mate, you've created that environment where he
Mm.
knows that he can talk about anything, and we've had some incredible discussions. But I think that's the thing about the Table Talk project, is it actually creates an environment where people feel like they can be heard and listened and known. And I think a lot of the issues in society actually is because it
Yeah.
starts at the table or not at the table.
Yeah, I can relate to you so much in that I remember when I left the police, and it wasn't long after I left the police. I obviously did 10 years, and I remember thinking I have wasted 10 years of my life and I wasn't here for my child, like, because I was working overtime and night shifts, and like I was always on the job, right? And I was crying, and I was apologizing to my then 12-year-old, saying, I am so sorry I haven't been here for you, and that I feel like I've wasted your childhood. And she said, I don't know what you're talking about. You were always there when I needed you.
Huh.
And I was like it literally was, for me, I felt like I'd wasted the time, right? But
Yeah.
where it mattered, obviously I was there. I was there when she needed me. I was there if she ever said she needed to talk. We had conversations in the car and at nighttime. And, we always, even when we leave the house now, we always say, and my daughter's not much older than your son. And, she said to me the other day, because, going through that transition into adulthood, it's a bit messy. And so she said to me the other day, "You're the person I'll always ring when I need something or when I need to talk." And I'm like, okay, I haven't completely screwed this up.
Yeah, absolutely. You create a safe environment, and that's such a beautiful thing. You should be so proud of yourself as a mom. You were doing the best with what you had, with what you could do at the time that you had to do it. And I think, that's such a beautiful thing because, you're putting food on the table, you're supporting it, all that sort of stuff. I think the thing is, and this is why at the start of the Tabletop Project, we do like a 10-week program or a 5-week program, depending on what organization wants it. But we do a date night.
Mm,
And the reason why we do a date night is because one, date nights are dead. Unfortunately, it's so sad to say that, but a lot of people, a lot of marriages, a lot of partners, they just don't have date nights. It's like, I don't have time, don't have money, don't have, the thought even that that's even important. And so what we value and what my wife and I, we have date nights all the time. And whether it's inexpensive or expensive, it doesn't matter. But we value that time because we know that the foundation of a healthy family is us.
yeah.
And so what we're trying to do with the Tabletop Project is to say, hey, you know what? Like you guys matter the most. Like, yes, it's really important for you to have space for your children, but if you don't have space for yourself and you're not building relationships with yourself and you're not growing that relationship, then you're going to struggle to really build that family network and create time and space for them. And I think the thing is, what happens is that you might be married or you might be together or whatever it is, and you have a baby,
Mm,
and all of a sudden that you have another personality in there, and maybe they're quite needy, maybe they have a disability, maybe they've had some complications, and then
yep.
all of a sudden it's like this kind of this split, if you like, because all the attention's going on the child, and understandably in some ways, but also to recognize that we've got to invest in that relationship and those date nights. And so what we do is at the start of that, or I run, date nights in the community as well for couples, but just to empower them to say, hey, you can actually cut out time just for yourselves. And then I teach them about the Tabletop Project and how that works and how they can input that into their family. And I said to one particular couple, they said to me, oh, but I don't have kids. I can't use the Tabletop Project. I said, here's the thing. What it does is it creates the environment so you guys carve out time. And then if you choose to add children into your life, you've already got that foundation. And
Yeah.
that's why the Tabletop Project, we want to focus on early learning, kinder and early primary school, because we know that if families start young with young children, the foundation's there so that when they're teenagers, they're not trying to get their kids out of their rooms with their devices
Hmm.
for that minimum once a week. This is valuable to us. We make this a special time.
Yeah. Everything you're saying is like, I'm thinking about my own, my own childhood and the also like what we have done in our family. And I mentioned, and people know who listen regularly, that my husband's got cancer and he's having time off work and stuff. And it was interesting because he used to work away. And when he came back and he was here permanently all the time, we started having every night we sat around the dinner table. Sometimes the TV's on in the background, but it's on mute because we want to talk to each other. And in actual fact, it was my daughter who was like, we don't need to listen to this. We need to talk. And I think it's
Mm.
because like in her early years, we, as the two of us, whilst my husband was away, we would sit together and talk. And so I think it's just an extension. I mean, it's what you get used to. It's what you expect of your partnerships and your relationships and the people around you is that, hey, everyone's phones are away. Everyone's like, we're just going to sit here, even if it's for 20 minutes whilst we eat a meal or half an hour whilst we eat a meal, and we're going to
Mm.
talk to each other. And sometimes it's hilarious and sometimes it's silly and sometimes it's serious. So that sort of has been a big theme in the last year as we sit around and have dinner together around a dinner table talking. And yeah, sometimes the TV, because 2020 is on in the background, you're just watching the score, but like it's not blaring at us. But when I was a kid, the news was on and
Yeah.
no one was allowed to talk.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, see, the thing for me is when I was a kid, we had dinner every night together, but it
Mm.
wasn't like a ruckus or it wasn't like people were talking. It was sit down, shut up. And so it was almost like this regimented time and the space to eat food together, which was the right decision. But then
The
there
wrong
was
environment.
nothing, yeah, in wrong environment. And I remember the best time that I had at the dinner table, and this is the only time I can remember that I actually found joy, is when I pushed my brother's head into a bowl of spaghetti and my parents laughed. Like, yeah, that was probably the best time that I could imagine. I don't remember any other time. Don't remember any
Yeah.
conversation we had or anything like that. And what that did was that just showed me. And it's funny because I've spoken to my other brothers about it, and they also didn't feel like they had a voice in their home and a
Yeah.
voice at the table. And it's funny because I spoke to my parents after I created the tabletop project,
Yep.
and I said, if you had this walk through process of the tabletop project to help with meaningful conversations back then, would you have used it? And they said, yeah, I think we would. But
Yeah.
because the
Right.
thing is that with great knowledge comes that great responsibility, as Spider-Man says, and that sense of understanding and that education says we can do this better. I mean, there's a study done in 2019 by Old El Paso, right? Old El Paso is the Mexican food
Oh yeah,
brand for
the
those.
taco brand.
That's right. Yeah. So they did a study, and they found that 7 in 10 families don't eat together regularly.
Oh
Seven
yeah.
in 10 families. Now, my gut feeling says from 2019 to now to 2026, it's worse. But the thing that I find really remarkable is that one of the reasons why they didn't gather is one, of the time, devices, and then the other one was they always fought, that the dinner table became a fighting place,
Yeah.
and that
Battleground.
was a battleground. And I wrote a blog about that recently, about the reality is that when we come together, it's not a place for correction. It's actually a
Mm,
place for relationship. And I think it depends on what kind of view you have of the table, but the table is a metaphor for gathering together. So you could be having a picnic on the floor, or you
yeah.
could be, at a restaurant, or you could do whatever it is, but it's about actually intentionally making time a minimum once a week to carve out that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and like I said, I mean, I've always worked really hard to have a connection with my own child. It's been more difficult with my husband. I mentioned before we started, we've been together plus 30 years. We've worked FIFO life. We've had until in even recent years, in the last 10 years, we had very separate lives. We were very separate. We were together but separate, and
Yeah,
no date nights, and no, like it was sort of like we were two people trying to coexist, but we didn't know how to do it properly, right? And in the
yeah.
last 10 years, we have worked really hard, and we do go on date nights. Actually, went on a night for the first time in a while last week. And it was like,
Hey,
and
good
we
job.
looked at each other and we were like, why don't we do this more? We love spending time together when we get time together, like,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
that's the tragedy. That's the tragedy. Most of us really do like and want to be around our partners because we wouldn't have chose them otherwise, right?
Yeah.
But we don't, you have to, and I learned this very early on in the piece of marriage and relationships. There's that old saying, the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. Well, no, actually the grass is greener where you water it. And if you water your own marriage and your own relationships, then they're going to be green and luscious and feel connected. Whereas
That's right.
if you're always looking over there and thinking that's better, then it's
Hmm.
never going to work in your own space. So I hope that I have imparted some of that onto my own child so that she understands she has to nurture herself and nurture her own relationships.
Mm.
But our kids learn from example too.
Yeah, absolutely. And thing is, I speak to a lot of parents, and they say, "Oh, it's just too far gone. I can't. This is
How is
just
that
it's
possible?
too hard." Yeah, no, but this is too hard. My relationship. Do you mind if I tell you a couple of stories?
Sure.
So there's one particular story that really sticks to me, and we were doing a 10-week program with an organisation that foster children. We did a 10-week program, and we traveled a long way to get there. And these people came a long way as well. And at the end of the 10-week program, we had like a sharing time of the impact of the tabletop project on their family. And this woman got up and she said, honestly, this was the last straw. Like this
Oh,
was the last straw of our relationship. And he said, why was that? He said, because my daughter was at a point where she was in drugs and being
yeah.
away from the home and things like that. And the police would ring the mum and say, I just let you know, like your daughter's here, doesn't want to come home, or this is happening, or whatever it is. And the mum got to the point where she was like, she'll come home when she's ready. Like, I'm not going to
Oh,
come and get her. She'll come home and get, like, it was just such an estranged relationship. This child had only known trauma, had
yeah.
only known brokenness. from being in the foster care system. And this mum was taking her in and loving on her and supporting her, but it was just getting so much. And maybe some of your listeners are experiencing that with teenagers. And the deal was that she thought this email came through the organisation and said, "Oh, we're going to do this. Would you like to attend?" And just so happened that it wasn't too far away, and they decided, "Yep, we'd like to. I'll do it." And she spoke to her daughter and said, "Hey, like I know where we're at right now, but can you just do you want to have a go at this?" And they came along and they've been doing it. And after the 10 weeks, and she said, "Because this was our last straw, I'm just so thankful for the Table Talk project and how this has helped us to come back together." And on the night, and this breaks my heart, like I'm a little bit teary, to be honest with you, but she came up to her mum and was giving her hugs, was rubbing her back, asked if she'd get her water or a drink or whatever it is, and I think she was just blown away at that, and that sort of thing. So that was really, really powerful. And that literally it's having a dinner a minimum once a week, having a conversation and having a check-in to make sure everyone who leaves the table is actually going to be okay. Like that's literally how the Table Talk project works. And I'll go through that a bit later, but that, that is the format. And so the restoration and the power behind that was just so powerful. And it just reminded me of how restoring being together with people that you love and your commitment to actually making that effort to be together and have conversation could be so powerful. The second story is this particular woman took in uh, five people, five children, and it was an absolute shit show around the table. Like I'm talking just this in the start of the Table Talk project, the 10-week program, there was yelling, there was fighting, there was accusation, there was
Oh
all
my
these sorts of
gosh.
things. And it was just awful. And she was going to give up. And by about the fifth week, as they committed that minimum once a week, it started to settle down a little bit
Uh,
and there was respect, and they had a conversation about what was respect and what was the important thing around what they're going to give for each other and those sort of things. Anyway, a teacher actually came up to the mum
mm.
and said, "What have you guys been doing the last 5 weeks? Like, what's been happening? Because your son has changed. Like in the schoolyard, he stuck up for his sister when
Wow.
something was going on." And she was like, "What do you mean?" "Oh, well, she was getting bullied and he stuck up and it was just a really loving kind of moment." She said, "All I've been doing the Tabletop project, we're just having dinner once a week together. That's it." And she just said, "We'll keep doing it because we're seeing big changes in your son." And this is a son that was, like almost on the verge of being kicked out of school and, those sorts of things.
Wow.
It's just a couple of stories of how just something so simple, a pastime that has been lost, can be
Mm.
brought back and we can see huge things and powerful things.
I think definitely a pastime of sitting around the table and conversing with each other. I just don't think it was done in the way that we are trying to do it now. Like,
I agree.
I think what you have created, this program and the idea behind it, is something that actually hasn't been done before. It's been
Mm.
done in families that are loving and caring, but I don't know about you, but in my house, it was like, sit down, shut up, don't talk back to adults, eat your dinner. I was like you, by the way, hated veggies,
Mm-hmm.
would be the last at the
Yeah.
table, would
Yeah.
gag as they went down. I fell asleep in my plate more than once. It was dry and crusty by the time I wasn't allowed to throw it out, and
Yeah.
I never ate it. Like I was one of those kids that was like really terrible. And it was because it was
Mm.
horrible to me. Like the food would tasted horrible. But anyway, like I don't think we've ever done it like this before. And the reason why we have such a disconnect in our society and in our communities and in our families generationally, like there's all of this people saying, well, I don't talk to my parents anymore. Well, there's a reason why people don't feel connected to their parents or their grandparents, or the
Mm.
generations have had this massive divide, is because there was no effort put in to make them connect or to understand them where they're at or to listen.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think one there's an organization over in America called the Family Dinner Project, and they've got 20 years of research at a Harvard Medical School of the benefits of eating together. And I'll share just a couple of things. If you think about this, right, when you were a first time mum and you went to your pediatrician or those that really helped you breastfeeding and sleeping and all those different things, I promise you, not once did you hear you need to have dinner together with your family, right? Never once, right? But the statistics actually said, I bet you heard that you should read to your kids at night, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
the
yes.
importance of this. But the reality is that the statistics actually say it's more beneficial to eat together as a family for children than it is to read to your kids at night. It's more better from an educational perspective. Now,
Mm,
I nearly fell off my chair when I first read that. And then I realized that actually that's so true because, when you're reading a book, it could be really monotone, or even if you're exciting, it's still like regimented type behavior. Whereas in a eating dinner environment, you've got different personalities, you've got
yeah.
different people, you've got different tones, you've got different words that are being spoken, you're hearing different stories, all that sort of stuff. And so they find that more beneficial. The other thing is that they found a reduction in eating disorders and
Mm,
drug addiction and alcoholism. They found that it improved mental health and well-being. That was off the charts. And they also found the impact as well was that more healthy eating. So they actually ate healthier when
yeah.
they ate together rather than, you know, Macca's or KFC or
Yeah,
pizza or
yeah.
whatever. And so the benefits of eating together at the table outweigh the of not actually doing it.
Yeah.
So I think the thing is there is so much more power in doing it and making the time and starting somewhere than not actually doing it. And I think the thing is for me is that about 5 years ago when my daughter was quite small, she's 14 now, she actually used to say, okay, guys, I'm going to run it tonight. I'm going to use the web app. I'm going to do this. And she would click the buttons and things like that. And we
That's
would
so
listen
cool.
and we would share and we would do that. And that's just been a real powerful thing that we do. And I guess from a personal perspective, it was at the dinner table through these tabletop times that my daughter shared that she'd be bullied at school, that she felt the space to be able to share that she'd be bullied at school. We then had to intervene in that situation with the school, and she was able to be helped, and now she's got a really great group of friends. It was also at the dinner table when my son, who has a mild intellectual disability, when he was younger, shared that he had been sexually abused by another child on the bus, and it was there that we needed to intervene and try to teach the school that it's not okay to put that perpetrator back on the same bus and all those sort of things. But it was at the dinner table where they felt comfortable enough to say, actually, there is something I need to share. And I'm not
Mm,
saying that we're not available all the time, that they can tell us any time, but to have a designated time, it
yeah.
would be really, really powerful. And that's what's really helped our family.
Yeah, and all of those stories, even and first of all, sorry about your son's, like that's tragic, and especially, I'd imagine that would have brought some stuff up for you as well when it happened. Like I talk about this a lot in the podcast that our own trauma often comes up when our children are at the age we were abused, and or even the moment they're born, you don't remember anything, and all of a sudden, all of these memories come up.
Comes
That
back.
happens a lot, and but the thing is that you never had anyone to talk to. It was minimized, justified, down, but you didn't do that because you had tools in your tool belt to go, hey, mate, like that's, not okay, not appropriate. We're going to help you here. And itself is so powerful because your son isn't left with the ongoing harm that goes on when something isn't being done about it. Pediatricians and nurses, they don't say it's really important to sit down and have a meal with your child. I think if
Mm,
we did say that, if it was something that we normalized in our society, we'd have a lot more connected families. And I know, like you said at the very beginning, families are very busy, parents have to work, things like that. But if you only show up once a week for that dinner and, and you give it your all in that moment, then, we're not asking, well, no one's asking you to give 100%. That's
mm,
impossible. And,
mm.
parents try our best all the time, but
Yeah.
it's just in that moment, that's what you have to give to your kids. So tell
Mm.
us a bit more about the project. So I'm really intrigued. So you've got a 5-week and a 10-week program, plus I get all the newsletters, by the way. So tell me about the project and how it works, or what's the theory behind the program?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to share this. Basically, the tabletop project uh, is uh, is a menu, if you like. a menu where it helps facilitate these conversations. We designed a web app, which is, if you go to the tabletalkproject.org, you go to and you click on a big button that says back at the table, you'll be taken to this web app. And this is the place we're encouraging families to come a minimum once a week. Now, ideally, I would love it not to be on a phone or on a computer, whatever it is. But unfortunately, to gather data that helps us to improve our ability to help families, you can't do it any other way. And so basically, it works like this. You've got a menu: entree, main, dessert. Entree is the food we eat and prepare, and we provide recipes that are healthy and easy to use and cheap and those sort of things. And then we have the main, and the main is the conversation starter. And we provide conversation starters on all different topics that people would like to use. So there's conversation starters for younger, for teenagers, for older, for really young. And it just creates that environment for children to be able to share and it's a bit different than how was school today, good or bad, or, that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And then the most important part is the dessert, and the dessert is a check-in, and that's all about recognizing that we want to make sure that everyone who leaves the table is going to be okay. And so we ask two
Yeah.
questions. We ask two questions, which is, what attitude are you leaving the table with? And is there anything else you wish to share? And that, is there anything else we should share, is super important. And it's super important for a number of reasons. One, for those who are neurodiverse, and as I said, I've got a son who is, it sometimes takes a little bit more time to process. And so you might ask a question for a conversation starter, they might not contribute then, but then it's processed and then they go, oh, is there anything else we should share? Actually, I do have something. This is what I would like to share. And so that's really important. The other thing is that if there's something else going on for them, whether it be bullying, whether it be something that happened, whether an adult did something, whether something happened at school, whatever it is, there's also that space to say, actually, there is something else I wish to share. And so that creates that environment. And then what you do at the end is you set a date for the next time. So it's that recognizing, hey, this was a great time. We want to do this again. And so that's pretty much the core of what we're encouraging people to do. It's just a facilitated conversation that helps you be able to do it. And the truth is, after a few months or 6 months or a year or whatever it is, you may not need that process anymore. It becomes normal. It becomes natural. And that's actually the dream. We want people to feel like they don't need that part of the tabletop project again, because it's a normal part. We come up with our own conversation starters and it's a very beautiful thing. So, that's the core of it. The other part of it is on the website is what we call important conversations. And those important conversations is a list of a number of different types of conversations, like the conversations that we think that parents should be having with their children, like the body safety consent question, the gender question, the sex question, the racism question, the political question, all those different things that are coming up for them and are in their world.
Yeah.
But the kids think we have to be experts to be, but we're not. And so we've got reputable links there to organizations that have better knowledge about those topics. And so the other part is that we also offer what we call, that's focused around helplines. So let's say you're having a conversation and your child actually says, Mum, I'm really struggling to get out of bed, or I'm really feeling down, I don't know why, or actually I am suicidal, or this is what's going on for me, or I'm really struggling with my own gender and those sort of things. There might be some things, it could be a crisis point. And so what we've done is we've put a whole bunch of crisis helplines. So you don't have to go looking for where can I find those crisis helplines, because you are not meant to be, as parents, if they're listening today, you're not meant to be the expert in every single topic. Okay. You're not actually meant to be their encyclopedia. You're just meant to be their parent that loves them and cares for them and then listen. And you can say, I don't actually know the answer to that question, but hey, let's work it out together. And so there's that. And then the other thing, what we do is we run three things. We have I come and speak. I'd love to have more opportunity to come and share about the Tabletop Project and how that can help organizations support families. And so that's sort of more, conferences or one-on-one, whatever it looks like. And then we do what we call immersive experiences. And so the organization would invite me to come in. They would provide some food as the entree, if you like.
Yeah.
And then I would basically facilitate that day or that evening or that morning or that lunchtime and help them have an experience. So I walk through the story of the tabletop project, and then we get into the experience of the entree, main, dessert. And it's very interactive. It's very connecting, and people can walk away so they can go back to their families or the families they're
Yeah.
working with some tools to help them. And then we have the 10-week program. The 10-week program, we work with early learning, early primary school, high school, all different organizations. And what we do is the organization identifies a bunch of families that choose to commit 10 weeks. And that 10 weeks is broken up into three-course dinners, which the organisation provides. And I run all those days, all those nights. And basically you have a date night for the initial 3-course meal. This is what the project's about. This is what it is. They get an experience without the children present,
Yeah.
ideally. Sometimes that doesn't work like that, but that's what we want. And then we have a halfway point. So in between that, they're going home and they're just having a
Practicing.
meal, a minimum once a week. That's it. A meal once a week for 5 weeks. Then at 5 weeks, it's a halfway point. And that halfway point is an opportunity for them to bring their families, to engage together, post-it notes, there's questions, there's a whole bunch of different things that engage them to go, hey, what's this experience like? And then the 10th week is a celebration, doing the same sort of things, but then it's an open discussion around what was this like? How did it impact? How did it help? How did it support? And then basically at the end of that, I developed quite an extensive report for the organisation to take back to their board to say, look at the impact. And we're seeing like 90 to 95% of people saying, we felt listened to and heard. We hadn't been gathering at the table, but now we're doing it all the time. Will you continue using the tabletop program? Yes, 90 something percent said that. Children said that they felt listened to and heard. There's stories of these are the topics that people have been talking about and connecting with and those sort of things. Yeah, that's kind of how we run it at this stage. I'd like to develop the web app to be even more effective, but obviously that's funding.
Yes.
So any
Yes.
listeners want to invest in the tabletop project, and that would be really great to make it more intuitive and more effective.
While you were talking about the 10-week program and just all of these things, I was just thinking, wow, imagine if schools invested in that program for their community and parents got it, it just, everyone's screaming out for, even parents are screaming out to feel more connected, right? And everyone's screaming out for help and for support, and something so simple is like, I think this is a really important part of what people could be doing. And I was thinking so many schools and like all of the things. So I'm really keen to like promote you as much as possible, or promote the
Thank you.
Table Talk project as much as possible, because I'm just thinking, wow, there's just so much that could be achieved. And like you said, in the story with the young woman or a person who was, felt disconnected in the foster care home, and then they were connecting back. And it doesn't take away what's happened, the trauma, the everything, but it's the start to healing, isn't it? When you feel heard and you can connect with someone and you realize that they're not against you. They're actually
Yeah.
here. They really want you to succeed. They want you to be okay. And
Mm.
and in that moment, sometimes I used to say to my daughter all the time, I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to like help you find them, or I'm willing to come back to you. Let me come back to you when I've got the answer. Or
Mm.
sometimes there's things that, because I remember, I don't know about you, Neil, but when I was a kid and I felt alone, I felt like I had to deal with everything on my own. And I felt like some things that were really adult problems, I was taking on my shoulders as I had to deal with them, because no one offered any other options. So, the thing is that when we normalize conversation and we as adults and parents step up and say, actually, that's not a you problem. That's a big adult problem that we need to handle. So thank you
Mm.
for telling us. Now we can help you with this, because this is not
Exactly.
your responsibility.
Yeah, I think that as well. And I think one of the greatest privileges that have ever had is to fight for my kids. And what I mean by that, I'm not talking about with weapons. I'm talking about
Advocating.
with my justice heart, my advocate. Like I often think, and I don't blame my parents, right? So I don't blame my mum
Yeah.
for not listening to me. I don't blame, like I've been on that journey, and it was pretty dark, and like my mum still, hopefully she never will listen to this podcast, because the reality is that she still doesn't think that it was abuse, because it wasn't until I was in my late 20s that I was talking with a guy, and he was wrestling with his own sexuality, and I shared my experience, and he stopped me at the end and he said, "Look, Neil, I need you to know that's abuse." And I'm like, no, that's just experimenting. That's what my mum said, And I was in my 20s, I was adult,
I know,
like
so many
even hair on
kids.
my chest, kind of adult, and I didn't know. And then I had to go on that journey and started that process. And
It's
so
tough.
I think the thing is that, I often think, if mum said no, what he's doing is wrong, and you're never to go around, never to be with him again, not connecting. I mean, my mum caught me with him on top of me and him not allowing me to move, you know, with the shed door closed. I remember that. I remember being in that situation, and mum just said, "Oh, I think you should go down." That was it.
Mm.
No conversation, no, what's going on here? Like, like, doesn't seem right. So I often think about that, but hindsight's a beautiful thing. And also, I think I listened to one of your podcasts and you said, you can't reverse trauma. You just begin to live with it differently. And I think that's the thing for me. I can't stop what happened. I can't change what had happened, and I can't go back there. It's impossible to go back there and take the trauma off my body. But the reality is, what I can do is I can move forward for one. I can work through my own trauma for two, and I can do everything I can to help protect my children as much as I can, and also other people from experiencing that and creating a space, if that does happen, that they do feel listened to and heard. And I think the thing for me is that, when it comes to this, as a dad, all I want to do is be able to fight for my children. And there's been moments in my life where I haven't been able to, because I haven't been there. But I believe that, teaching in body safety consent and talking about the things that, people don't want to talk about. We did a pilot before we sort of launched the tabletop project, and we asked two questions. I had a research student ask two questions, and they said, "Are you talking about suicide? And are you talking about mental health?" And we found that only a few are talking about mental health, but no one's talking about suicide with a kid. And the number one reason we found was because they feel like they don't want to put something in their head. Now, the
It's
problem with that is that if you live in a society as a teenager or a young person, it's talked about all over the
everywhere,
place,
all
everywhere.
over social media, all over their schoolyards, everywhere.
Absolutely. And I think the thing is, what we recognize is that if we don't talk about tough stuff, they're going to be taught by someone else. Parents, our responsibility is to talk about the things that are hard to talk about, so that our kids don't have to feel like they carry them on their own.
Yeah.
And the Tabletop Project creates the opportunity for those types of conversations, and to repair and restore and
Yeah.
reconnect, and to be able to eat healthy food and spend that time together. And you never know the true impact of those moments until they are doing it with their children, if they're blessed to have children as well. I know the impact of the Tabletop Project in my own family won't be seen until they are saying, "Hey, let's have dinner together with our own
Yeah.
family," or they come back. And there was some teenagers or young adults that came to one of the 10-week programs as part of the family. And at the end of it, they said, "I'm really looking forward to coming back home. When I move out of home, I'm looking forward to coming back to my parents' house and doing the table project with them once a week." And so
Oh,
I just think, there's a taste. Once you get a taste for something like this, it's not something that you want to forget. I had
mm,
one lady come up to me and she goes, "I don't even have, like, I can't even see my table. Like it's covered in stuff, like
oh,
books and everything like that." And I said to her, "What would it look like if a minimum once a week, all you did is clean that table?" That could be a really good example to your family that this is important to you, because they walk past and they see all those books, they see all those boxes, they see all those things, and they go, "Well, that's not a place for connection." But if you remove that and we sit around it, then it changes why you do it in the first place, and you have this place of connection. And I'm finding, I was doing a seminar with a whole bunch of local government and all these people who had done mental health first aid. They invited them to dinner and they invited me to come and run it. And there was a whole bunch of more elderly people there. And they came up to me after, someone came up to me after, said, "This is so good for us. And I'm like,
Mm.
okay, I'm trying to get like how you're working with that. I'm thinking maybe grandkids or,
Yeah.
whatever it is. And they said, no, it's because we're empty nesters. And
Yeah.
when our children left, we forgot how to talk to each other
Mm.
because
Yeah.
we'd had children here, we've had people here, and now all of a sudden it's just us. And now
We don't
this
know how to
actually
talk to
provides
each other.
exactly, and this provides the space for those conversations. So I think the Tabletop Project is intergenerational,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter what age, you can still connect with it.
Yeah. No, and do you know what it reminds me of is yarning circles in our beautiful First
Mm-hmm.
Nations culture. And, I was thinking about sitting around a campfire and all of those things. And that's what it reminds me of. And I think it's just an extension of like that connection to community and connection to each other. Like I was just having this before I jumped on and we started recording, I was reading a post I created in LinkedIn. It was about the three things that the conditions that need to exist for someone to abuse a child, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's a kind of, I didn't feel it was controversial. It was just like, we need the vulnerability or the naivety of a child who doesn't understand what's happening, the power imbalance of the perpetrator to the child, and then the disconnection between the child and their safe adult. Those are the
Yeah.
three conditions in almost every case that
Mm.
exist in some way, shape, or form. And
Yeah.
someone said to me, well, it's not about the child being responsible for their abuse. And I was like, how did you get that from my post? I was saying that as these are the three conditions, it's not putting a blame on the child. It's basically saying us as
Mm.
adults, parents need to ensure that those conditions don't exist,
Mm.
or where we can, we need to patch them up so that, someone can't abuse our kids. It puts them at increased vulnerability. And so,
Absolutely.
and what's happening here is that strong families, strong connected families with strong connected children, getting back to, the whole purpose of this podcast is to link it back into when we connect with our families and we connect with our children, they feel safe to come to us and tell us when something big is happening. And they
Mm-hmm.
don't trust us with this. They won't trust us with the big stuff until they can trust us with the small stuff. So all of these
That's right.
small conversations make a big difference when something big happens, when something bad's happening. When I was going through PTSD, anxiety, my own mental health challenges, I had
Mm.
suicidal thoughts at some stages. I
Mm.
felt like I couldn't talk to anyone about those things, even though
Yeah.
my family is there and it's not something you talk to a child about. But my husband, I didn't think I could talk to him about them back then. And he regrets a lot. Like, it's been 6 years now, but he regrets a lot because he was working away and he just left me thinking I was fine. Yet I
Yeah.
was in this, mental health hell, that hellscape that I was like literally sitting there with water above my head and bobbing up and down, trying to be a parent, trying to survive, trying to go through all of that. And there's a lot of parents out there who think that they can't tell someone that they're struggling.
Absolutely. And I wrote a podcast about that as well, that was basically about how loneliness exists in the home,
Yeah,
in that
big
parents
time.
feel like they are alone. And it sounds like you were in a situation where you felt alone, even though you had support around, but you were alone in your thoughts, alone in
Yeah.
your mind, alone in what was going on. And I think that's how a lot of children feel. It's not like, I guess the way I describe it is a young person has a really tough day, right? A really shit day. And they come home and they have an environment where they feel listened to and heard, that nothing's off the table, and they can share about what's going on, right? Now, that's their parents go, we're here to support you. We're here to love you. What would it look like for us to help you in this day or whatever it is? And you know what? It becomes a shit day that they often will not forget, will not remember, and they get up the next day and they go to school, they go work out, all parents intervene or whatever it is. But let's just retract that for a second. What about if that same child had the same kind of shit day and came home and they didn't have that environment, that their parents were too busy to listen or non-existent or working away or whatever it is, and they had to then deal with what they're dealing with on their own. And now let's say they haven't been taught how to be resilient. They hadn't been taught how to do those things. The statistics would say that could be the last day they live and they could actually end their life. And I heard a study a long time ago, and they said young people who suicide actually don't want to die.
Mm-hmm.
They just want their voice heard, or they just want the pain to stop, or they just want the bad day to end. Now let's just bring it back to what we were talking about before. If you intervene in that moment, if you intervene in that time where you say, actually, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm here to listen. I'm here to hear you. You might be having the shittest day. And look, this is super close to home for me because last year, for the first 6 months of our year, my son was on suicide watch and he was going some really, really tough times. And honestly, it was absolutely fucking awful and really hard. And I'm just so glad that we were able to keep him alive but locking up knives in padlocks and all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff.
Just doing what you had to do.
It was just horrific. It's just trying to keep him alive. And I think the thing is, the one thing that was consistent was that he knew that he could talk about us at anything. So
Yeah.
we knew everything was going on for him. And it just got too much. One day he was walking down the road and he sat down and he was going to end his life at the end of our street. And the neighbor drove in and didn't know at that time that she would save his life. And she did. She saved his life. And from that day, we started working through some stuff and then he was able to get some help and support. But the one consistent thing was that he knew that we were there for him and that we love him and we care about him. And we can't stop the voices. We can't stop all that stuff. But what we
Yeah.
can do is we can be there to support him through that. And so, that's probably a great place to end because the Tabletop
Yeah.
Project really is about supporting families to have those meaningful conversations that hopefully give children the hope that we know that they deserve.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree. I mean, I've been in your shoes as well with my child, and I haven't talked a lot about that. But, as parents who deeply love and care for our kids and we just want what's better for them and we don't want what we had, that is why these programs and these projects are so important. And it's such a simplified version of you don't have to have a degree you've done all the work for them. So tell everyone how to find you and how to find the project and how to get it into their own homes if they want to.
Yeah, you just have to head to thetabletalkproject.org and you'll get all the information there. On our socials, it's the Table Talk Project, and that's Facebook or Instagram. So you can find us anywhere from there. And I'd love to have a conversation.
Yeah. And you're good at it. You're good at it. You make people feel good. And I'm so grateful. I will be sharing all of the links in the show notes so that people can find you easily. I think this conversation, we could have multiple different layers to this. I think any school or any organization that is looking for a way to connect their families and their people needs to have a chat with you, Neil. Thank you so much for being here, for finally jumping on my podcast. And 2026 is the year of change. I feel it's very much we're going to connect back to our roots and to our families.
Oh, that'd be so good. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Before you head back into your day, I want to invite you to just pause for a moment, take a breath, notice where you're sitting, and remind yourself that conversations like this can stir a lot, especially if parts of today's episode touched on your own experiences or your own worries as a parent. If anything came up for you whilst listening, please know you're not alone and support is available. I've included help and support resources in the show notes if you need them or if someone you love might. And if you're listening as a parent, I want to gently remind you that you don't need to have all the answers. Showing up, listening, and staying connected matters more than getting it perfect. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time to sit with a conversation like this. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.